Hi guys, welcome to Let's Look Back, episode 15. I'm really excited for this one. What's that?
Actually, I invited some guys over to the studio to record with us. Is that?
Oh, yeah, our nice padded studio with all the furniture and
I know we didn't rig up any extra mics, but we'll figure it out.
Cool.
But yeah, super cool guys. You'll love them. So let me tell you about them. They walk you through the ins and outs of obscure topics, while also performing a variety of impressive impressions and overusing the word kayfabe. Please welcome from sunny Los Angeles, Andrew almost joined a pyramid scheme Price, and Dave just started wearing hats Baker. All right, so yeah, welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show, guys.
Andrew and Dave from the Deep Cuts podcast.
Hello.
So excited to have you here. I can tell by your expression.
I almost spit out that water that I was just drinking.
Yeah, I can tell you guys weren't ready
great.
for that. Yeah,
that was great.
Noah sent that to me maybe I think 2 or 3 days ago, and I was crying. So I'm glad you guys liked it.
I really want
We say
someone...
kayfabe so much.
I know. I want if you guys
so
have a subreddit.
Like, I don't mean in the podcast. I mean just in real life. We say kayfabe so much.
Thank
it's
you.
so spot on.
Yeah.
If you guys had like a subreddit, I would imagine someone would have a kayfabe counter of how many times you guys have said that word. Because it is
100%.
I literally didn't know what that word was till I listened to the show, and I had to learn pretty quick. And then I was like, oh, I love this.
Did we ever explain it, or did you have to Google
I was just
it
like,
to try and figure it
Google
out?
what is kayfabe, and then I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. It's like it originated in wrestling, and it's like the character, it's
the art of pretending something is real. Yeah.
Pretty sick.
And also nobody knows where the word came from either. That's the interesting thing about it.
There is kayfabe around
it sounds
kayfabe.
Vaguely like pig Latin, but it's not. It's a really strange word.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like like you said, it comes from the early days of professional wrestling, and there's all kinds of weird carny speak and shorthand. I worked on a wrestling TV show for I think 2.5 seasons, and there was all kinds of weird slang like that I picked up while working on the show, and because of that, I kind of forget that some people don't know wrestling slang. I'm not even a huge wrestling person. Like I, know a little bit here and there and like some stuff, but like I remember once, like my first day on the show, I was supposed to be carrying something from point A to point B, and this giant behemoth of a man, like 6'5", 400 pounds of muscle, comes running up to me and goes, "Where do I gorilla? Where do I gorilla?" And I was like, I don't know what gorilla means. I'm assuming that means like, where do you prepare to go on because of context clues? But honestly, I have no real idea. So I'm just going to point that way and hope that that's correct.
And that man died that day.
Yeah.
He was more worried about guerrilla warfare. He had other priorities.
Yeah, I learned after the fact that term comes from...
You stopped the terrorist attack that day.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I learned after the fact that it is where, like, basically where do the wrestlers stand right before they go on, and it's called gorillaing because of Gorilla Monsoon, who used to be a promoter, and he would, like, pick people to go on, and like, so everybody would be, like, huddled around where he stood, because he always stood at the same place off to, like, stage right or whatever, and he'd be like, "All right, you, go in, do the thing," or whatever. Yeah.
Huh.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now
it's
I know wrestling dialogue.
Yeah, we discussed wrestling on one episode, and we were basically like, I don't know anything about wrestling, but we found
completely foreign
some clips that we were like, maybe we got to start watching wrestling. It was pretty awesome.
Wrestling terminology is so much cooler than film set terminology.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, it's like when you work on a film and you
I
forget
hate
people don't know what that
film
means.
set terminology. I hate using any of the words. If I'm gonna turn a light on,
striking.
I'm not gonna say striking. I'm just gonna say, "Hey, I'm turning this light on. Don't look at it." Like that seems
crossing.
Like, I feel like, yeah,
points, doorway points.
I'm calling you out right now, film set. I'm gonna cut a promo right here. Film set industry, your terminology sucks.
Hold on.
Soundboard.
There we go.
That's a character right there, like the soundboard operator that just is way too delayed with all of his.
Yeah.
Hold on, guys. Let me. It's not working.
Talk amongst yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves. No, I was literally gonna say that. I was like, it's like when you work on a film set and then you forget, like, people don't know what you're saying. Like, oh, I got a 10-1, and it's like,
Yeah.
what? Talk like a normal person.
Yeah.
But yeah, film student jokes. What's up? Okay, so thank you guys for coming on the show. You guys, basically,
Thank you.
I'm a huge fan of your guys' show, and basically your show, we are basically, as we said, we were talking earlier, we're like the dollar store version of you guys. You have this great chemistry. You research things very well. We do not research things at all. You guys talk about actually interesting things. We just find random nostalgic crap and talk about it. But yeah, so what is Deep Cuts? Like, what's your guys' show about?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm very glad that people think that we have good chemistry, because one of the things I was really concerned about when we started doing the show, and we talked about it for a long time before we started, was this idea of like, do we need a third person? And we kicked around the idea for a while, because I was kind of concerned. I don't know if Dave was, but I was kind of concerned because we're basically the same person. Like, I mean, there's a lot of differences. Like, I'm much more introverted. I obviously have like a much deeper voice. I'm a much more laid back person. Dave is like very like very energetic and enthusiastic, and you know, we have a similar we have a difference in personality in that way. But aside from that, like, on paper, we're just the same guy. Like, he's from Tucson, Arizona. I'm from Roswell, New Mexico. Like, we're just the same person on paper, and we have like a lot of very same opinions about things. So I was really concerned that the show was just going to be boring, because it was just going to be like two of the same person, like, agreeing with each other. So yeah, I mean, there's no joke there. I'm just glad that people think that.
We're similar, because we've been friends for like 5 years, and we have like the exact same sense of humor, like a lot of the same stuff. So that was also like a little concern, but we're like, I mean, it's just us talking, like, and we were like, we're just making this for our friends. And what makes me happy is when like our friends message me, they're like, I love listening to your show, because it's just like sitting in on a conversation with you guys. And that's also what I like about your show, is it is highly produced, and you guys do research your topics very well, but it's also you guys just genuinely yourselves talking about these things, which I really fuck with the vibe. One could say.
Yeah, well, and I think it's especially nice when you guys are so in on a topic, but then one sentence and you're veering off into some other conversation for like 10 minutes about something.
15 minutes of me talking about Paul Lynn's Halloween special.
Or you like laughing, stumbling through a line, like it's just a serious read, and then all of a sudden you're just like laughing, can't get through the line.
Yeah, that's really purposeful from an editing standpoint on my part. I mean,
don't give away the kayfabe. Yeah, what are you doing?
I was literally, this is how much we say kayfabe, because I literally was going to say maybe I'm giving up the kayfabe. I was literally going to say that. But from the beginning, from episode 1, I mean, if you listen to the first episode, the Stratemeyer Syndicate, like, it literally starts on this like very high produced intro, the usual intro we do, and Dave goes into this is episode 1 of our podcast. He goes into the sort of preamble for what the episode's about, and then he stumbles and he messes up the line, and I leave that in and I cut the music, and then we have this little like, oh, we fucked up or whatever, and then we cut right back into the music and go on with the episode. And I made that stylistic choice from the very beginning, that I really like this idea of going back to kayfabe, or just that discussion. I really like this idea of having this kayfabe, or having this sort of produced presentation, but then like showing the cracks in it,
peeling
and
back
kind of like letting things peek through every once in a while that are just kind of revealing like, oh no, this is all fake. Like I really like that. And maybe that's why we love the Andrew WK thing so much, is because it's sort of that at this grand scale. But I've always really been into that concept since I was younger, like making short films and things like that. Like we used to
Yeah.
purposely put in like continuity errors and things like that, because I really just loved this idea of making this like crafted narrative or fictional world, and then like allowing inconsistencies to peek through. And I think that's probably comes from my love of like really terribly made movies, you know, that I watched when I was young, where those continuity errors and those inconsistencies were not purposeful. They were sort of done in a genuine act of trying to make something good and just failing to do that. So that's a very purposeful part of the presentation of the show.
I mean, it also just helps us to, like, on a metatextual level when we get research, because, you know, like Andrew said, our show is very well produced and well edited, which is all him. And, you know, I write a good number of the scripts, and you know, sometimes you get things wrong, sometimes you misspeak, sometimes you say things as fact when they're not, and allowing those little like flubs and outs kind of takes the pressure off it, because it makes it feel a little bit more human and imperfect. So when we do make a mistake, it's less like, I can't believe you betrayed our journalistic faith in you, and more, oh yeah, it's, of course you just got that wrong, because everybody's going to get something wrong at some point.
Yeah, well, it's nice because it kind of separates you guys from having, you know, like there are a lot of true crime podcasts that they have to like kind of keep this theme, and it feels very much like someone's narrating a book. And you guys having kind of cracks in the mold and kind of being able to break from your formula, it really just, it works really well, I think. I think you definitely...
We kind of strive for the same thing because, like I said, we barely research our topics and we don't act like we do. Kind of the fun of it is like discovering things together or discovering things live. We look up things on Wikipedia because we don't really care if it's true, because sometimes the crazier shit is funnier when it's not true. Like if you find out, oh, that didn't really happen, it's like way less fun. So I like that. But yeah, talking about you guys' research, where do you come up, like where do you find these topics? These are like such specific things, and do you have some secret special database? Like, how do you find all this information?
I think the answer to that is very simple. I am an exceedingly interesting and genius level person who only cares about things that are rapturously fascinating.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean,
No, it's just, honestly, it's just like Andrew and I shooting the shit and then being like, hey, remember that one time when that one thing?
That's exactly us, yeah.
Yeah, it you know, it's, one of us will say something about like, you know, I remember one time that I feel like we were talking about like a Lucio Fulci movie, and like, didn't he kill somebody with a car? Like, that would be kind of cool to do an episode on. I made that up. I don't think Lucio Fulci killed anybody, but you know what I mean? Like, those, it just kind of happens, and then we just keep like a running tally of weird, interesting things. And going back to what Andrew had said, we have very shared common interests where we're both interested in the common intersections between commercial viability and artistic intent. We're both interested in the idea of creative authorship. We're both interested in like a cult of persona and cultivating a persona, and this kayfabe, you know, thing that we've been discussing this whole time. Also, I'm now realizing that I don't know if we actually did summarize what the show is. The show it's called Deep Cuts.
Well, in a meta way, you kind of did, because you just rambled. You started talking, then you just rambled on, and then now we're circling back. That is the show in a nutshell.
Yeah, the intro that I say at the beginning of every show is welcome to Deep Cuts, the podcast where we pick an obscure topic and walk you through the ins, the outs, and the nitty-gritty so that you can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at your next forced social function. And I feel like that pretty much sums it up. It's just kind of like, would you be at a party and be like, did you know that Stan Lee was sexually bribed to do all of his
you
convention
did it. You taught
appearances?
that barbecue or whatever.
I told you at our like social distance yard party, I literally did that at my next social function. I was like, did you guys know Andrew WK is like multiple people? What's up with that? I literally
through his
did
mask too, just
yeah. Yeah.
Andrew WK adopted.
I was born in the kayfabe. There's one point when I was listening to you guys that I was like, I wanted to scream through and talk to you because I wanted to point something out. You talk about, Dave, you talk about this in several episodes. You talk about you love how creators, whether it be authors or whatever, have like a through line in their work, like one singular theme that just pops up over and over and over again, whether they understand or not, because they're obsessed. And I'm like, you guys do the same thing. Like, you do it with that, you do it with kayfabe, you do it with this cult of personality. And I was waiting for you to say, wait, we do that with the show, but you didn't. But I think that's awesome that you guys, because I didn't know if it was like intentional or not, but you guys just
it wasn't really supposed to be that way.
But it's really interesting how it all loops back into each other.
Yeah, the idea was really just more generically really interesting stories in pop culture, and I think we realized at some point that they're all just. The thing I really like about the show, because I listen to a ton of podcasts. Like in the last 6 or 7 years, whether it's between like hour and a half commutes and spending like maybe 5 to 6 hours a day listening to podcasts while I'm working on whatever, whenever I'm able to like listen to something, if I'm not doing something that doesn't allow me to listen to something, I've listened to just probably thousands of hours of podcasts, and like I don't even really listen to music anymore. I just listen to podcasts, and so I have this like really extensive exposure to the format of podcasts and the way that they're constructed and things like that. And another thing is that no matter how much I love a podcast, I always kind of eventually get burnt out on it, because a lot of podcasts, the idea behind podcasts is that they're sort of like hyper niche explorations of this single idea, and that's kind of how you attract an audience, is by you don't make a podcast that's like the pop culture podcast. On this show we talk about anything to do with pop culture, and because that's too like broad, and it's just kind of it's antithetical to how podcasts work. But the double-edged sword of that is that after you've listened to like literally 400 episodes of a show, you're finally just like, I'm just sick of this. I'm sick of they talk about the same thing, and no matter how interesting it is, it becomes a formula. And the thing that I really like about our show, and not that I don't think that maybe someday it could end up like that, I don't really know. Maybe in like 3 years we'll have like 60 episodes that are just basically the JJ Arms episode over again, and there's 60 other people with like prosthetic gun feet and like I don't know,
spies, but
yeah.
not really.
But at least right now, I feel like our show is this really cool hybrid where it has that definitive thing to it that makes it feel like it's like, this is a deep cuts episode. That's totally a deep cuts topic. This is totally something we would do. But they all have that similarity in that very specific way. But within, couched in that similarity, these stories are all so kind of different that from episode to episode, there's that anchor point that makes you want to listen to the show more and makes it feel like a cohesive thing. But it has this variety where you never, at least so far, at least to me, doesn't feel, and maybe that's so short-sighted to be saying like 20 episodes in, but it doesn't feel like it has that like repetitive nature where eventually, because like one of my favorite podcasts of all time is Last Podcast on the Left, a true crime podcast, and I love it. And if it wasn't for the personalities of those guys, the show would have gotten super old a long time ago, because all of these stories that they talk about they all kind of end up being the same thing. Like the psychology behind serial killers is like uncannily the same across the board. Like every serial killer does it for the exact same reason. They all have the same motivation. They all have the same like life experiences and traumas. And it's really just the personalities that drive that show. And even then, 600 episodes or whatever number that they're in at this point. At this point, it's just like, like I'm getting a little burnt out on this. So I like the way that the episodes are all really different in what the actual stories are. It's not like this is true crime. We do a true crime podcast. There's nothing specific about the nature of the stories, but that one anchor point that you pointed out makes it definitively a deep cuts show and makes it have that quality to it that makes people want to listen to it more and not just listen to one episode and kind of be done because none of the other episodes are up their alley or whatever.
Yeah, I think what you pointed out is how I view podcasts is, yes, the premise entices me, but I really stay because I just like the personalities. I like listening to people. As a kid who, like, through my teens grew up on, like, YouTube and stuff, I've just been attracted to personalities and people who have great chemistry. I don't really care what you're talking about because I just like that person and how their chemistry is. So I think that works well with your guys' podcast and everything. What I also like, I'm a pretty big comics nerd. I like a lot of comics. I've recently, in the past year or so, kind of retransitioned from, like, my childhood getting into comic books. And Dave, you like to bring in comic books a lot, and you relate it to these extremely niche things that, like, I understand. Like, I think, like, the first episode I listened to, you said something that was really... There you go. So it's something that was really, like, niche in comic books, and I was just like, hell yeah. And Andrew, you too. So you guys just have this, like, good chemistry and, like, this niche stuff that I immediately was like, oh yes, I fuck with this. So Dave, I wanted to talk to you about what is Fuck Off Squad?
Thanks for what is Fuck Off Squad? That's what all the people when they come to me, that's what they ask. They ask, what is Fuck Off Squad? Fuck Off Squad is a coming of age romance comic about 3 skater kids in Los Angeles as they attempt to navigate the morass of laziness and sloth that is your early 20s. So it's a 120-page OGN written by me, illustrated by Nicole Gu, the illustrator of DC's Shadow of the Batgirl. Available now wherever books are sold, but also maybe don't go anywhere where books are sold because of the pandemic. Maybe just get that shit on the internet. Just get that shit on the internet. But yeah, it's published by Silver Sprocket and available wherever books are sold as well. It is the book that Nicole and I basically, to be perfectly blunt, toured the world on. Like, that was the first, like, I've been publishing comics since I was about probably 17, 16. Made a lot of really bad comics, made some okay comics, and Fuck Off Squad, probably because of the title alone, has been received very well, and I'm eternally grateful for the connections and friendships that I've made from the book, and the process of making it was pretty cool. It was all right, you know? Sometimes when you're just like, what if we made this thing? And it starts as a little sketchbook drawing in Nicole's journal, and then, 6 months later it's a thing, and then now all of a sudden we're in fucking, England at Thought Bubble selling comics to English kids. Like, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Another project I saw, I was looking at your website, we are both big Watchmen fans. We watched the new show, and
What was that? I couldn't hear you. Sorry.
We're big Watchmen fans. We just watched the new show on HBO.
Oh, you cut out after we
oh God, Dave.
Something, I don't know.
Don't do this to them.
Anyway, so you had I knew you were doing a bit, but I was like, maybe he's not. I'll go along.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I'm only familiar with the seminal comic created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. I'm not familiar with any of the other things that people keep trying to shove in my face. I'm not aware of them.
The HBO show.
You know what? The only way I would like
Is Alan Moore's name on it? I don't think that's real.
You don't see it anywhere. Odd.
If they had done a Watchmen show that was just like Damon Lindelof in his backyard, like wearing costumes, running around on a little mini stage, that's the only way I would acknowledge that they made another Watchmen thing. Otherwise, that shit is stolen. I don't care how good it is. I have no interest in seeing that.
I get it.
As a comics creator, I totally understand your point of view. I get it. But the shit slaps. But anyway.
But it's only fucking amazing, but that's okay. It's all good.
But I saw on your website you have, can you explain what Shitty Watchmen is?
Yeah, Shitty Watchmen is a group collaborative project that I organized. It is a deconstruction of the most seminal deconstructionist text within comics. So it's me and Nicole Gu and like 10 other artists, and we all took one issue in Watchmen and we tried to redraw it as poorly as possible.
I love that concept.
The goal being twofold. One, because shitty drawings are really funny, and two, because Watchmen is so densely complex that most people attribute all of that complexity to Alan Moore, which is deservedly so. He's a brilliant writer and deserves credit for his work, but also most people don't acknowledge the compositional elements of the book and the details within the compositions that Dave Gibbons contributed to the work. And by reverse engineering the work back to its almost like embryonic thumbnail stage, you can evaluate if the work still communicates in that rough form. And that's obviously in the eye of the beholder, but I personally think that even in its worst possible execution, Watchmen still communicates roughly what is going on, and I think that is an immensely important element to the work that cannot be overstated, and the probably the main contributing factor to its longevity, because so much of comics and illustration typically is rooted in a specific style that becomes dated very quickly, and Watchmen's approach to composition, and specifically the way that Dave Gibbons organizes panels and presents hierarchical structures in terms of foreground and background, or even just figure to larger environment relationships visually is it's stunning. Like, for someone who doesn't necessarily make comics, you might not know this, but working on a 9-panel grid is not only hard because there's not a lot of space, but humans are binocular, which means we like shapes that are horizontal. But in a 9-panel grid, all of the shapes are vertical, which means that you're composing like 3 times on, and then shrinking it down on top of itself, which is really, really, really difficult. And nobody ever gives Dave Gibbons any credit for that. So Shitty Watchmen was our kind of like, hey, look how amazing Dave Gibbons is. Watchmen is so cool.
I love that concept. And this podcast episode is becoming exactly what I wanted, which is inside baseball on comics creation. So thank you very much on that. Andrew, you've also created some comic books. Is that right? You wrote something?
Yes. Yeah, I have a comic. It's called Deadbolt AI Private Eye.
Love that name.
And it is a coming of age story about 3 young teenagers living in the. It's like a Huxley-esque philosophical sci-fi story about a future dystopian society where essentially a bunch of robots were created for this war that never happened. And right around the time that all of these robots were created and sort of never kind of fulfilled their, what they were created for, what their existence was brought into being for, this huge group of rights activists start lobbying for robots with a certain level of artificial intelligence to be given human rights. And so all of these robots are just one day just told, like, you have human rights and you're free to go and you're free to just live in this world, and they're all just kind of like kicked out of the storage units where they have been being stored for years because they just never were used for this war that kind of didn't happen. And then they basically just have to figure out how to live, essentially. It's tackling this kind of complex idea of existence in modern society and how we sort of fit into the world and how we find our way, and examining that through the lens of these robots who are, for all intents and purposes, they're kind of babies because they just literally never lived lives, and they just kind of have to figure it out from scratch. And it's all based around this one robot named Deadbolt, who is a private eye, and the whole story is kind of told in this Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler style, like film noir hard-boiled detective story. But these sort of like detective tropes are just kind of a template for this sort of existential exploration of what it means to be alive, and finding yourself in a increasingly chaotic world. There's one volume of it so far. It's called The Hard Reboot, and it's sort of the first quarter of the story. It was written by me. It was drawn by an artist named Guillermo de Villarreal. A letterer named Tobin Rassicot lettered it, and the cover was done by another artist named Ann Weischik.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I just love comics, and like you guys freaking make them. So I just wanted to touch on that. I have so many questions, but I'm just not going to do it. In episode 18, you guys talk a little bit about, I think this is like my last question, then we can get into the meat and bones of, not that this hasn't been the meat and bones, but you briefly talk about creative influences because you were talking, I think that was the Jared Leto episode, you're talking about creative influences and stuff. Can you, but you don't really discuss your own, just like, can you guys give a brief overview of like your own creative influences? Maybe talk about like some creators that you really vibe with recently.
Before we should state that I enjoy the works of Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, he's his favorite
Noah
director.
Enjoy the works
and the Beatles are my favorite band. So what the fuck, Dave? What's up with that? No,
you took my joke because I was literally just gonna say Steven Spielberg
and then the Beatles.
And yeah, I was just gonna say. I gave Dave more shit than is actually in the episode, and I cut some of it out.
No, I totally got what you were saying, but it was also just so funny because I was I
totally
texted Tennyson,
but
I was just like, dude, the Beatles are my favorite band. Like Spielberg's like your favorite. We have to like give him shit for this. This is so funny.
Well, I was like, motherfucker, he's right. I mean, I do enjoy. I have plenty of other favorite. Directors, but that is just that hit different.
So funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's just the thing of like, when someone is asking that question of, who are your creative influences, or what makes you excited about making things, or even just kind of like in a social setting when you're with other creatives and you are asked what you've been watching recently or what you like. Those are all ways that people are using shorthand to assess each other's not artistic capabilities, but just kind of like seeing what level you're on in terms of like, how do you interact with things, like you're not going to go into a meeting at a major production company pitching a movie and somebody's like, oh, so what have you been watching lately? You're not going to say like, oh, I spent 4 hours binging the Kardashians or something that's like super mainstream and kind of droll. You're attempting to comport yourself with a sense of authenticity and stay true to who you are. But at the same time, there's a shorthand that's happening where there's a passive, this is how I'm shaping the narrative of who I am as a creator. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's not always fun to think about how people code switch like that. But in creative circles, that does happen. Mm-hmm. And anybody who says that their favorite director is Steven Spielberg can go fuck themselves.
He doubled down. Holy shit. I respect it. I totally get what you're saying, though. Like, we came from film school. We know what you're fucking saying. We know.
Yeah,
Well, you
no
hit
shit.
you hit the when you referenced Brett Ratner. That's what really got me too. I was like, yep. I think I've heard that a few times. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with those people. Like I said in the episode, I love Spielberg's movies too. Jaws is a fucking dope movie. It's a great movie, but also like, if I'm gonna be like shooting the shit, being like, oh, have you seen this? And oh, do you like that? I'm not gonna be like, hey, have you ever seen Schindler's List?
It's like, of course you've fucking seen it. It's like,
it's a huge movie. Like,
heard of this
everyone
guy
has seen it.
Spielberg? Yeah, bro. What?
No,
Yeah.
I like to tell people Message from Space is definitely up there with my. one of my
You
favorite
jest,
films.
but I absolutely have said that before. I fucking love that movie.
No, that episode that made me because I went and watched clips of it after you guys were talking about it, and I loved it so
That's
much.
fucking awesome.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it now, so I'm gearing up to watch the whole thing at some point soon.
You should. Highly recommended.
But yeah, question still stands. What are your guys' creative influences?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of stuff because, you know, not that Dave doesn't. We both do a lot of different things, and we have a bunch of different types of influences. But you know, specifically in terms of like what I'm doing now, and you know, stuff that for the podcast and things outside of that, like I have a bunch of different influences from film to music to you know, video games, and you know, like a lot of the stuff that has highly influenced me when I was younger has been kind of like actually what we talk about a little. Our episode that comes out on this coming Wednesday. I don't know when you put this episode out. I don't know when you release, what your release schedule is.
Sundays.
Every Sunday.
Our upcoming episode, you know, is really all about this topic. But as I was growing up, you know, in my teenage years and older, I got really into sort of like avant-garde, experimental, and like outsider art. Mm-hmm. And I really just loved the sort of like rejection of formalism and the rejection of rules, and the way that it kind of I was watching this this Buster Keaton scene the other day, and there's this really interesting scene where it's the scene from the short film called I think it's called House Decorating, but he is trying to like decorate this house, and he keeps like fucking up, and all these different comedy routines ensue. He like lays down he takes off his coat and he puts it on the ground, and then he lays out a rug and he nails the rug down, and he realizes his coat is still underneath the rug, so he just cuts a hole in the rug, takes his coat out, and then he like realizes that there's a hole in the rug now, so then he puts another rug over it and stuff like that. And then there's like a really cool stunt where he has to like install the chimney, so he gets up on the roof and he can't like get down there, so he just like puts the chimney around his neck, and then he just slides down the roof and falls into the hole where the chimney goes, and then just puts it in place, and then falls through the house into a bathtub. And it keeps cutting away to this other story of this woman that's in the house as she's like making lunch, and like she tries to open up this bottle of cream and it explodes in her face, and all these weird things. And it's like so strange. But then there's a scene where she's in the bathtub, and it's actually fairly provocative for like a movie from the 1920s. Like you can kind of see her bare shoulder, and she's kind of washing herself, and then the soap falls out of the bathtub, and she tries to reach over and grab it, and like she starts leaning further and further over, and she still can't reach it, up to the point where like she would need to like stand up and like reveal herself. So then literally a hand like from the cameraman comes out and just covers the lens, and then like she looks at the camera, like smiles and like kind of sheepishly, and then a hand comes out, covers the lens, and then it moves, and then she's done it. She's gotten the soap. And I really love things like that. Because, you know, back in that time, the reason why I love like the movies of the 20s and the 30s is because there weren't any rules, and so they were literally inventing those things as they went along. And in a lot of ways, because it was sort of the beginning of like in a world that where all these art forms are thousands and thousands of years old. Movies are only like 100 years old. And at the time, it was a new art form. And so it was like in and of itself outsider art. It was this thing that everyone was just kind of like, oh, what? You can take a bunch of pictures and it makes a thing that moves, and like, what, fuck? And then they were just,
oh shit, this train's coming at me, run!
Yeah, they were just doing different stuff. Like, we've so commodified like what a movie is now, but back then they were just inventing the rules. And I love the idea of like this concept that like there's no such thing as a fourth wall. They hadn't really invented that concept yet, so they didn't even think about the fact that it would be weird if they had this little gag where the cameraman covers up the lens so that she can like stand up without being shown.
Love that.
And I love the innocence of that. And, you know, one of my biggest creative influences is Orson Welles. I love him as a director. Obviously, you know, Citizen Kane, that's the thing that's like, oh, it was the number one greatest film of all time on the AFI list until recently when it got pushed back by Vertigo. But you know, that's obviously great. But, you know, the movies I really love by him are movies like Touch of Evil or his adaptation of The Trial or F for Fake, his documentary. Like, I love that because, you know, like Citizen Kane, he was inventing how to make a movie, because up until that point, movies were just plays that you just filmed, and then he was like, what if there was a ceiling? That's not an Orson Welles impression at all. But that
he went through a window and
the French, it was a French champagne.
But yeah, and I love the discovery of that, and you know how that existed at that time. It's sort of the dawn of movies, and outsider art kind of like carries that on, where there are these people who, for a lack of knowledge of what the established rules are, they invent and discover really new and interesting things. So, you know, we talk about a lot of that on our new episode, but, you know, in terms of music, you know, I really love Daniel Johnston. He's this songwriter who basically in the 80s, he just like, he's a mentally ill man.
Oh, yeah, I know what this is.
Yeah. And he in the 80s, basically he loved the Beatles, which, by the way, fuck you, Dave. His favorite band was the Beatles. He loved the Beatles so much, and he just wanted to make music like the Beatles. That was his whole goal, was I want to make music like the Beatles. I want people to like me, and I want to get a girlfriend. And so
that sounds like 12-year-old me. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so he started. Yeah, except for he was like in his late 20s. And he was obsessed with like all these different things. He was obsessed with comic books, and he loved Casper the Friendly Ghost, and he loved Captain America. And so he started making all this music, and you know, in a vacuum of not really knowing how to create music like that, or how to, like, you know, write a song about, you know, your feelings or whatever, he just took all of these different things that he loved and kind of like mashed them up into these, you know, there's, you know, he has literally a song called Casper the Friendly Ghost that's just about Casper the Friendly Ghost. He has a song called about King Kong, and it's just like a description of the plot of King Kong. That's what the song is. And I love stuff like that. You know, in terms of films, I really love this Japanese director named Shinya Tsukamoto, who you know, a lot of people know about Takashi Miike, who he made like the Dead or Alive series, and he made a lot of he's made a ton of Japanese films, horror, and
literally 100.
Yeah, like so many. And he's great, but Shinya Tsukamoto is I mean, he sort of went on to gain a craft and get very good at filmmaking, but his first movie that he made, Tetsuo the Iron Man, is like just this fucking weird thing where it's like he just like made like this movie that was like a hybrid of live action and then like weird stop motion using a bunch of just junk parts and making like weird biomechanical robots out of like just trash and like
sick.
Stop motion animating it all, and it's just this really weird fucked up movie, and like all of the sound is created after the fact in Foley, so you know the whole, like every single detail of the dialogue and the sound effects, it was all just recorded later on in a studio because he just didn't know how to shoot sound on location. I mean, this was in the 80s or the late 80s, or maybe it was the early 90s. Yeah, I think it was 92. I think that movie came out in 92. But it wasn't like before sound existed for movies or whatever. But he just didn't know how to do it. So he made this movie, and then he went back and meticulously recorded every sound, every incidental sound in this entire movie, and it creates this whole world. Like, the fact that he did that, it completely crafts this really atmospheric world for this film. So I guess, yeah, there I could name off hundreds of other people. I really love like the Japanese noise music, and just their sort of the way that they explore like the way that noise music in general, but specifically Japanese noise music, explores this idea of like unwanted stimulus. It's like, you know, music is this desirable thing that you want to hear, and the central conceit of noise music, or specifically Japanese noise music, is like, not every emotion is supposed to be good. Not every emotion evoked by art is supposed to make you feel good. Sometimes art should make you feel bad. It should make you feel mad. It should make you feel sad. It should make you angry or disgusted. And so that's what that is. It's this exploration of like, this is music that's not meant to make you feel happy. It's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable or mad or disgusted. You know, like, there's a lot of guys that were doing that. Merzbow is probably the most well-known Japanese noise performance artist. Mm-hmm. I referenced him on the Andrew WK episode, I think.
Yeah.
And then there's
in a bit too. I feel like we were doing voices, and you started. Were we talking about Bane? And you like did Bane talking about Merzbow?
Yep.
No, it was Sean Connery. Kind of
my
Bane.
favorite is Merzbow.
There's also this other Japanese noise artist. His name is Yamataka Ai, and he was in he's in a noise group called Boredoms. And then he was also in this old noise group in the 80s called Hanatarash, and they did danger music. So their whole idea was like, they performing music that was like, that put themselves and their audiences in physical danger. So like one time they did like a show, and he drove a bulldozer through the audience, and everyone like freaked out, and like he had to be like, he was restrained by the police and arrested, and all these people almost died, and he was just like, fuck, like, you're just driving this bulldozer, like, yeah, I mean,
holy shit.
Yeah, awesome. That's what I mean. Maybe it's because we did the Andrew WK album or episode, and because we've been doing this new episode that's coming out, and maybe I'm just, my headspace is there right now. But thinking back, like, outsider art and this idea of like exploring new ideas and breaking formalism, and not either rejecting rules or not even knowing about them in the first place, is kind of, I feel like that's really been the most influential thing on me.
Have you heard
since my early adulthood?
Have you heard of the band 100 Gex?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Have you listened to their newest album, 1000 Gex?
I haven't listened to the newest one. I just was watching a video about them, actually. But
because everything you're saying sounds like you would fuck with 100 Gex. I've been obsessed recently with their debut album, 1000 Gex. So wacky, hyper pop, just like so many. It's like they just took all these influences and just rammed them together, and they just said, "Fuck the formalism of a pop song. This is what I want a pop song to be. Fuck it." Yeah,
I really love Mike Patton. He's a musician and a composer. He's been in some of my favorite bands of all time. He's the singer. I mean, the thing he was most famous for, the reason why any of his other bands got notoriety, is because he was the lead singer of Faith No More.
Oh.
But his real band that he was in before he kind of got recruited to that is this band called Mr. Bungle, and they're one of my favorite bands ever. And they kind of did that too. Their whole thing was like genre hopping, mashing up a bunch of different like pop sensibility ideas. Their third album, California, before they broke up, it's like this weird hybrid of like Beach Boys style surf rock, and then world music from like different areas of India and Asia, and then like death metal, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then he also has a band called Phantomus, which is literally it's like death metal for like a Looney Tunes cartoon. So it's just like these really like hyper kinetic, just stream of consciousness musical ideas where like one thing starts and then like it's changed to something else before you can get used to it, and it's just crazy back and forth between all these. It's like basically someone had like 1,000 different like snippets of musical ideas and then just put them all together into one song, and then it's an album of that.
That's awesome. That's sick. I had something to say, but I totally forgot. Dave, would you like to tell us what you're...
I'm a big fan of Steven Spielberg.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
Fuck your comedic timing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess there's...
Jack Kirby, moving on. No.
Yes, Jack Kirby is great. But for me, I guess there's a difference between like people that I admire who are illustrators and then kind of have like informed the way I draw, and then maybe writers and musicians and filmmakers and that kind of stuff. Just because the act of physically making marks on paper is so laborious and difficult that, you know, a lot of people look to people who've done it before to try and find a cheat code or a matrix for how to insert themselves, which is why you get so many people in comics that are just like clones of other guys, where it's just like, oh, that's how you visually represent a car. I'm just going to do that. How's that? Is that cool? Is that great? But yeah, I mean, the list is, I don't know, I could go on forever. Katsuhiro Otomo, Shotaro Ishinomori, Hergé, fucking Wally Wood, Harvey Kurtzman, like it, you know, Taiyo Matsumoto, like, you know, I could go on forever. James Stokoe. Yeah, I feel like Andrew, he talked enough about influences.
Okay.
I mean, I kind of thought a similar thing to you is like I could just list off 100 names, so I kind of went more for like, let me explain like a kind of concept, and then sprinkle in some names.
Yeah. I mean, like we could do a whole podcast just talking about like people I've ripped off. You know, like I don't know. I mean, just looking.
Yeah, I mean, Deadbolt is just basically just like, oh, what if Philip K. Dick made a comic like that? That's just what that is.
But that's
looking at the stuff that's on my wall. Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the stuff that's on my wall, there's a Doug Wildey promotional Johnny Quest poster for when Kamiko got the license in '86.
Love that.
There's
I have
the
I have the first Kamiko Johnny Quest, so I found it in the shop, and I was like,
yeah, that book is great. William Messner Loeb's fucking
loved Johnny Quest as a kid.
I love Johnny Quest now.
Well, yeah, I still do. Yeah.
But yeah, and then right above that is a copy of, what the fuck issue is that? 8, Faust number 8. So, you know, you got a little bit of the Tim Vigil pornography, you got a little bit of the, you know, Young Boy Adventurer, and then on this wall you got a little bit of the Jack Kirby 2001: A Space Odyssey. You know how it is.
Yeah.
You know how it is. Behind me, you got a poster for Death Wish 3 and Danger Diabolique. You know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of
here, a little bit of there. It's no big deal.
Right here, you just got a giant stack of, you know, action hospitals. That's probably about 500. Just 500 copies of a 300-page book that took me 200 fucking days to draw. It's fine. It's cool.
Don't sweat it.
Mm-hmm.
I also realized a couple years ago, I came to the sort of self-actualized realization that every part of my like creative sensibilities and my personal aesthetic for the things that I like to make can all be traced back to Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
There you go.
It's all there.
It all culminates.
The fucking weird like
That's
homemade
not what
robots,
I thought you were gonna say.
the monsters, the kind of body horror of the way that Station like morphs at the end, like it's all there.
I probably have one of those too. It's probably Digimon or some shit. I think it's probably Digimon, the movie. It's probably.
Well, that just means there are going to be people 30 years from now or 20 years from now who are going to be think the same thing about Bill and Ted 3.
Yes.
Yep.
I forget what
It all goes back to that.
Yeah, is it just me, or does anyone else irate that the Bill and Ted 3 naming convention was jettisoned? I really hate the title Bill and Ted Face the Music. Why isn't it Bill and Ted's something journey?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or mission? Or, like, why wasn't it Bill and Ted's
Lit
existentially
AF
torn?
journey.
Yeah, that would be so good. That would be so good. Bill and Ted's dope-ass evening in.
Dope ass quarantine Zoom call.
Yeah. Bill and Ted's dope ass self-quarantining.
Yeah, I mean, look, am I going to see that movie? Yes. Am I going to be grumpy that it doesn't have the same naming convention? Yes, till the end of time.
Bill and Ted Face the Music. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't.
Come on, guys. It took 20 years to get this fucking sequel off the ground. I know there's been a ton of versions of this.
Yeah,
I feel
exactly.
Come on.
Anyway, you guys like Power Rangers? Did you guys like Power Rangers?
Are you setting me up for this, you son of a bitch?
I'm not setting anyone up for anything. I'm transitioning into my topic that I brought.
I'm
today.
feeling set up. That's how I feel right now. So.
Yeah, I mean, Dave will launch into something obviously, but I'll briefly say yes. I loved Power Rangers when I was a kid. I was less into, as I grew older, I was less into the sort of what Power Rangers came from, which was the live action tokusatsu hero character shows like Kamen Rider and specifically Super Sentai, which is what Power Rangers is made from. I was always more into kaiju tokusatsu shows like Godzilla and the other Toho movies. But Dave will go into Power Rangers / Super Sentai.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. One of the people I even said in my creative influences quick paragraph was Shotaro Ishinomori, the creator of Skullman, which then got adapted and turned into Kamen Rider. He's one of my favorite illustrators. Cyborg 009, Hikaida, Detective Robot K. I love his work, and I love tokusatsu, henshin heroes, as our boy Andrew just said. And yes, I did enjoy Power Rangers, but I am, and still do, but I am much more of a Sentai and Toku, writer person. I like the Japanese stuff, is the pretentious short way of saying it. No, I like the Japanese stuff.
well, you guys smelled right. That was a setup. Because today we're not talking about Power Rangers. We're talking about something else. You guys ever heard of Big Bad Beetleborgs?
Yes. You mean the show that was an adaptation of Metal Hero? Fuck yes.
Fuck yes. Get ready for Big Bad Beetleborgs. I'm pulling up the title sequence right now, if my internet allows. But yeah,
I just love how Beetleborg sounds. Beetleborg. I didn't even remember that the title of the show was actually Big Bad Beetleborgs. I thought it was just Beetleborgs, but then in my research,
Bad Beetleborgs. Big Bad Beetleborgs.
But yeah, did you guys watch? So you guys watched this show?
Yeah, I definitely did. I definitely watched a lot of. It was firmly in that camp of shows that I would watch before I went to school in the morning. So, you had Big Bad Beetleborgs. Big Bad Beetleborgs.
Kelly Forrester.
So it's got everything you guys fuck with. It's got tokusatsu.
Yeah, I mean,
it's got comic books. It's everything right there. And then
it was a mixture of. I mean, I liked Power Rangers as much as the next kid, but when I was a kid, I was really into horror, and and I loved the Universal monsters. I loved, when I was younger, I loved Frankenstein's monster. Now I'm kind of more of a Invisible Man kind of guy, but I loved the Universal monsters. I watched those movies. I think just they came on maybe it's like TNT or maybe they came on HBO or something like that. I don't. There's a lot of movies where I think back, I'm like, where did I even watch that? But it came on something. But I used to watch these movies a lot, and I loved those. This was Power Rangers, but it had like this other weird thing that I also loved, and it was really enticing to me that it had like the Universal monsters in it, or not the Universal monsters specifically, but it had the Mummy and Frankenstein's monster, and also like the Phantom guy, the main guy. Like I thought he was Jay Leno.
Yep.
When I was a kid. Yep. Like I 100% I thought that was Jay Leno for some reason. I mean, not for some reason.
It looks exactly
it
like
looks
him.
like it, but like I thought it was actually Jay Leno playing him.
Hey, you guys want to come and sit in my mansion with my robot guys? Hey guys,
I got plenty of cars.
how's it going? You guys want to be some big bad Beetleborgs? Come on, let's do it, guys.
But yeah, so that was the first season. This is the second season intro, which this is actually the version I watched.
I liked that they hung out in a comic
kid.
shop too.
Yeah, they started. The big bad Beetleborgs are actually heroes that they become from the comic books. They recast. So they recast the girl and they explain it away. There's a whole subplot I gotta get into, but they explain it away with some magic from the ghost goes wrong and accidentally changes the girl's face forever, and I think that happens in like the first episode of the second season. So that's explaining away how like why the girl is a different actress.
I mean, that's better. That's better than how they wrote off Jerry O'Connell on Sliders.
How'd they do that?
They basically at the end of the fourth season. They slide, and then at the beginning of the fifth season, they explain that in the warp hole, during the slide, his like soul got separated from his body, and his body basically got just lost in the ether, and then his soul came out of his body, and it just found the nearest alternate dimension version of himself, and so it went into this that universe's version of him, but he looks different because like in this universe you looked slightly different, and it's just a different actor that's not Jerry O'Connell, and
that's some
whole
Doctor Who shit.
Yeah, and the whole
I was about to say that's like Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But yeah, this show was awesome. It's one of those like fever dream things where I couldn't remember if it was real for the longest time or like what it truly was. Like most shows like this, and Baisaban is taken from several tokusatsu shows. First was Juko B Fighter. All the action scenes are taken from that. And then the second season is B Fighter Kabuto. And then the reason there was no third season is because there was no new series of tokusatsu to steal from. So they were just like, it's done. But yeah, this show is like so weird. Like the American version of this tokusatsu is so strange because it's like they not only do they have like these Power Ranger-esque fighting people, but then somehow mixed in are, like you said, the Universal monsters inside of a haunted house, and then they're also from a comic book store. Like it's just all these strange elements that like this is nothing like Power Rangers aside from like the fighting. Like Power Rangers is like dramatic, serious to an extent. This is just like, this was like a comedy. They were trying to transition into like the monsters being more of main characters, making it like a sitcom-esque like wacky show. Just
they're also kind of like Captain
strange.
Marvels, where they're like little kids and then they turn into these huge
like Shazam,
adult-sized fighters.
But like one thing I did I really liked is, as this is like related to comic books, they have like a whole subplot where they meet their creator, whose name is Les Fortune. Oh no, his name is Art fortunes, and
Yeah.
then later
I remember that actually. I remember that episode.
and then they later meet his brother, Less Fortunes, who creates the evil Beetleborg, the Shadow Borg, who they have to fight. And I just love that like weird peek behind the curtain of like the comic book creator, and his name's freaking Art Fortunes. What a beautiful name.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. It reminds me of two things. It reminds me of my favorite episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, which is the one with the clown in the comic that comes out of the comic.
Yes.
And the episode was shot like a comic, and it was like in comic panels.
What
I
was
thought
that
was just
called?
really cool. I don't remember what the name of the episode was called.
Yeah.
And also there's
It's
a
like
really
the Ghastly Grinner, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, the Ghastly Grinner. Yeah, the Ghastly Grinner. That's what it was. Yeah, exactly. And then there's it's like the second to last episode of Erie, Indiana, where if you know the premise of Erie, Indiana is, the main character Marshall. He moves from New York to this small town in Indiana called Erie, and he makes friends with this little kid named Simon, and they form this kind of like kid X-Files exploratory club where they investigate all these different paranormal things that are happening in the town. And it's kind of like, it's just X-Files for kids. It's a Monster of the Week show. And in the second to last episode, and the show was executive produced by Joe Dante, who directed Gremlins and a bunch of other
Flight of the Navigator.
Flight of the Navigator. What is the Explorers, which I fucking love the Explorers. Speaking of that's a fucking super fascinating thing, because like I'm not even gonna get into it, but they ran out of money, and so like they made like half the movie, and then like they didn't have any more money to make the rest of the movie, so the rest of the movie is just like a weird tone poem of them floating through space. It's so fucking fascinating. But yeah, so
awesome.
He executive produced it, and he directed the first couple episodes, and then he stayed on as a consultant. So in the second to last episode, the concept is that Marshall wakes up, and he wakes up into a world where Erie, Indiana is a TV show. He is himself the actor who plays Marshall on the show, Omri Katz, and the whole thing is a show. All the other characters are actors. Joe Dante is the director of the show, and he's the only one who seems to know that like their world is not fake and that it's a real world. And yeah, it's a really cool episode. That reminds me of that.
That's sick. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that because it's something I've wanted to talk about for a while. But when we figured out you guys were coming on, I was like, oh, this seems like a good one to talk to them about.
The best part about Big Bad Beetleborgs was the toys.
Oh yeah. I
do remember those.
Yeah, the Power Rangers toys were really popular. The ones where the heads flip.
Yep. Like from the body. Like
yeah, there was two different lines of toys that I loved, and I thought they were way better than the Power Rangers toys. And it was Big Bad Beetleborgs, because they were these like heavy, articulate, like every joint was articulated, and they had like this shiny kind of metallic looking plastic, and then the other one I really loved was the Biker Mice from Mars toys. Those were great.
Yes.
But yeah, these Beetleborgs toys were amazing.
I had I feel like I had one of their like little transformer like communicator things that you wore on your wrist that every gen of Power Ranger had. I feel like I had one of those. I don't remember though. But yeah.
It's kind of weird too that it's just so bizarre that they would take it in a horror comic book characters living in a mansion angle, because all of the Metal Hero franchises kind of fall into one of two buckets. Like the first three Metal Hero franchises are Space Sheriff Gavin, Space Sheriff Jasupan, and Space Sheriff something else. I don't remember the third one, but they basically are like Superman stories of like, or Green Lantern stories where they're like an alien who's a part of a peacekeeping force who comes to Earth, hides incognito, and then fights an evil organization that's trying to rule humanity. And And actually, the first Metal Hero suit, Space Sheriff Gavin, is the visual inspiration for RoboCop. They just kind of cribbed his mask fully. But after that, they kind of fall into one or two buckets. They're either Space Sheriff Light, where it's like some sort of alien or some sort of kind of guy in a metal suit fighting, for against this evil organization, and he's usually space themed or space connected, or kind of like police propaganda. Like there was one Metal Hero called Blue SWAT, which is just 3 robot superpowered police officers. There's another one that's called like Jason. I don't remember the name of it, but he looks like RoboCop, and it's a cop propaganda show where it's, I'm a dude and I've got robot powers and I'm gonna fucking kill bad guys and the police are good. Largely because the Japanese have a very different relationship with the police and policing than Americans do. Over there, there's there's not the racial disharmony that we have in our country, and also police officers are, typically speaking, not militarized in the way that ours are militarized. They also just look very different. Like they wear white sashes, they have white pristine gloves. They're typically a little bit more like they're just a guy hanging out in like a phone booth in your neighborhood that you can go ask for directions, as opposed to someone who is observing you, waiting for you to do something wrong, which is a lot of
they also don't have Americans, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if
you want to see a really cool movie about sort of like the culture of policing in Japan,
The answer is yes.
A movie called Stray Dog that was directed by Akira Kurosawa. It's one of his lesser known movies, but it's on the Criterion Collection. It's not like super obscure. But it's about a Japanese cop who gets his gun stolen, and then the whole movie is about him trying to get his gun back, because in Japanese culture and in the Japanese police system, like very few detectives are issued guns, and they're like, it's like gold. It's like, you can't just like fucking throw it in a hole and go get another one out of this armory of machine guns or whatever. Like they're very expensive. The ammo is very expensive, and like you have to treat it like it's your child, basically.
That sounds awesome. I definitely want to check that out.
With your whole description of that, where does Ghost Jay Leno come in?
Yeah, so he's like the one who gives them the powers. They walk into this mansion on a dare. They play this piano. Ghost Jay Leno comes out, and he's like, I got some cars. Do you guys want to be...
That's more Elmer Fudd.
Yeah, I don't know what that was.
It's more higher. It's more higher. How's it going?
Be very, very quiet.
I think they either
robot powers.
I think they either have the comic books in their hand or something happens, and he's like, okay, I'll make you like those comic book characters, and he just literally makes them, and then the Haunted Mansion becomes their base, and he becomes like their the guy who like sends them on missions.
Their Zordon.
Yeah, their Zordon. He's not at first, but I'm pretty sure he transitions to become their Zordon. It's silly. Very strange. But yeah, just a weird. But
the best part about the way Saban was approaching stuff there is you could tell, like, normally in development meetings there's like the golden rule of like shooting somebody down is you just say that's a hat on a hat, which means it's a premise that would work on its own, but with another premise that would work on its own right on top of itself. So it's gonna like be in discord with itself. Like you don't want to have the show fighting itself to be something else, or the movie, or whatever the thing is that you're pitching. So you hear that a lot in meetings where people are like, I don't know, that sounds like a little bit of hat on a hat. And that is not only a hat on a hat, but it's like a hat on a sombrero, on a hat, on a helmet, on a hat.
What's the wrestling term for that?
Yeah, the wrestling term is suit casing, I believe is the name.
From a ladder.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but like just the development of that show, like it must have happened so quickly because it is a hat on a hat on a hat. Like it's okay. So the premise of the show is not only is it kids turning into adults, which that's your hook, right? But then it's kids in a haunted mansion befriending ghosts, which is another premise. And then it's comic book characters coming to life, which is another premise. So the show has 4 premises all on top of each other.
And it's Jay Leno as a father figure to 6 children. I don't get it.
I
It's
don't know,
amazing.
I don't know what that is.
Is he a father figure? I don't know.
But yeah, that show's
I love it.
wacky. What have you brought for us today?
So the thing that I brought, which let me grab it, hold on, it's right here, which is one of my favorite books of all time, and was the first time I met the creator of something that I liked, and it like just blew my mind, is this book right here. It's called Teenagers from Mars, and it is a comic published by Gigantic Graphic Novels, written by Rick Spears, illustrated by Rob G. And it was published around 2005, 2004, 2006, somewhere in there, which was when I was, in high school trying to figure out, like, what the fuck am I going to do with my life? What is, I know it's going to be comics or movies or something, but like, how do you do this? And so I was really getting into indie comics and getting into manga and like trying to find different ways of approaching comics, right? Because it's not like there's a thriving indie scene in Tucson, fucking Arizona. Like it's like, there's a couple comic stores, which is great. I was very fortunate to grow up in a place that did have, of the cities in Arizona, Tucson is one of the more liberal leaning.
Crazy that you hate the Beatles, but Tucson is mentioned in Get Back. Weird coincidence.
Yeah. It's kind of like how you just wear hats.
Yeah, very interesting point. No, quick aside. Apparently, while they were writing that lyric, because they're from England, they've never fucking been to Arizona. John's like, "Is Tucson in Arizona?" And Paul's like, "I don't know. I think so." And then they just left it. Anyway, continue.
I kind of love that idea, like Philadelphia, Arizona.
Yeah, I've never been.
Yeah,
Tell me about it.
No, I've never been to Tulsa, New York. How is it there?
It's like how English people think New York is like a 2-hour drive from like California. Or
Yeah.
One of my friends is Australian, and they were going to be visiting their sibling in Toronto, and they were like, "Oh, do you want to, you could come stay with my sibling and I. We're going to be hanging out for the weekend. Do you want to? I know it's kind of a drive, but do you want to come?"
Kind of.
And I was like, "No, you don't understand how much of a drive that is. That's like a week. Like I can't just drive to Toronto."
There's an entire subgenre of films where we drive across the country. That's a whole movie can take place in that time.
Yeah. But yeah, so Teenagers from Mars tells the story of Macon Blair, who is a disgruntled, not Walmart employee. The place he works at is called Mall Mart, and he works in the hardware section, and he fastidiously guards over the very limited number of comics that Mall Mart continues to stock. And one day, a young boy comes into Mall Mart and purchases a comic, and his parent gets upset, and it kind of turns Macon's life on its ear. He loses his cool, starts screaming at the woman. He gets fired from Mall Mart, which then kicks off basically a story of self-discovery and defense of free speech, where the mayor of this small town takes up a war on the idea that comics should be distributed. It's similar to what happened in the 1950s with the Wortham trials. Comics start to be blamed for all of the societal ills in this small town, and Macon and his new best friend / potential love interest start a gang of 2 called the Comics Liberation Army. And so the book kind of becomes this this Bonnie and Clyde meets Taxi Driver meets Art School Confidential journey of them literally taking up arms to defend their medium of choice, but also the general idea of small town mindsets and intolerance to artistic expression with a pistol grip pump, as it were.
Sounds like a better version of Footloose.
It's Footloose if Footloose was hyper violent and about comics.
Yeah, that
way
sounds
better.
great. That sounds way better.
The premise of it kind of vaguely reminds me of that movie Cecil B. Demented.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Yeah, it's kind of got a similar thing. It's like I mean, that's a whole other discussion. I don't even want to get into. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to sit here and recite the premise of it to you.
No, tell me what the opening shot is.
Go beat by beat. Please tell me.
Yeah. But
It's about a director who is making a movie, and then basically they just his crew just go around the country like actually robbing banks, and they like shoot the scenes of them robbing banks, and they become these like you said, Bonnie and Clyde-esque like outlaws who are fighting for freedom of expression through film, and robbing banks and running away from the law while they're making a movie.
That sounds pretty awesome.
that sounds delightful to me.
That sounds amazing.
Which also sounds somewhat similar in tone and execution to the book The Auteur, also by Rick G.
I fucking love The Auteur.
Which is going to be turned into a HBO TV show by Taika Waititi, I think.
Yep. So excited about that.
I'm excited too, yeah.
I haven't read that, but I fucking love The Auteur.
Yeah, The Auteur is great.
I wonder, besides, if there ever will be, because like mediums such as film, comic books, and more recently video games. I wonder what the video game equivalent to something like that would be. I don't know if there is anything out right now that kind of matches that energy.
Yeah, video games are just it's
whatever medium is up next in the slot of.
Oh, I see.
What's easy to blame for our problems?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
I mean, they've already tried to do that repeatedly.
Yeah, I mean that was
and it happened. That's the
that was
reason
the big
there's
thing
ratings.
with the Columbine shootings, and like they like basically like Marilyn Manson and video games were blamed for that. And
Yep.
It's kind of. I mean,
there was a big witch hunt, or not witch hunt. That's a bad term to use, but there was a big like
moral panic.
Moral panic about like video games in like the 2005-ish era, with whenever Grand Theft Auto Vice City was huge, and people were like, you can murder a hooker in it, and like that became this huge story.
That old adage.
Well, and what I'm wondering is do we have anything now that kind of stands up for video games the way that
it's a little
comic
more
books have been, but I feel like go ahead.
It's a little more abstract, but like YouTube has had the same thing. They've had the same, like that whole adpocalypse where people were like, what the fuck is my kid watching? And then just advertisers were like, fuck, shit. Kind of similar thing where people were like it just changes forms. It's just like whatever the kids like, let's limit it and make sure
it's causing the violence.
It's causing the violence. That's the problem right there. But
the interesting thing about it now is that, I mean, I think the defining crucible of our time is social media, both for, and it's been both positive and negative. I mean, it's the reason that we have Trump. It's also the reason that so many people are able to make a living off of their art, and the reason why we don't have monoculture anymore, which I think is a very positive thing. I know that there are people who are nostalgic for a time when the Beatles were they were the pinnacle. I mean, this is separate
Dave.
This is separate from our conversation.
I literally thought you were going to say when the Beatles were the Spielberg of their time. I was going
no, but I mean, this is a separate conversation from me just like negging you all and pretending like. But I think that there is a reason why the Beatles are universally acclaimed, right? They were a linchpin act at a very specific point in time where information was easily dispersible, and because of that, youth culture then became culture in a global sense, and it was a monoculture that everyone, despite what walk or socioeconomic bracket you came from, had access to. Now, whether you liked it or not, that's different, but you had access to that thing, that core pillar of what society was, right? And then that has kind of echoed throughout time, whereas right now, that's the reason why people that are grumpy say music sucks now, modern music's terrible. Well, no, that's just not factually accurate. There's amazing music being made right now in the same way that there's amazing every type of media being made. It's just we don't have a monoculture, and so you have to go find the stuff that speaks to you as opposed to you being exposed to the stuff. And that is directly, like, causality wise related to the rise in social media and the rise of people sharing what they like and don't like and ideas through these kind of like lock chains of social interactions. The issue with that being, this is like one of the very few times where that, in air quotes, moral panic of what are these ideas that my kids are being exposed to and is it warping them, that's happening now pan-generationally, where people that are younger are actually better at assessing fake news, and people that are younger are actually more equipped to deal with social ecosystems than people who might be a little bit older and might not be aware of some of the tricks and tropes of the way social media functions.
That, and I feel like younger people now are we can easily adapt to culture changes, because now with social media, and you guys kind of touched upon this with kind of Hollywood in your last episode, kind of how fast our culture values change. It can be within like 5 years. So now you take that with social media and how fast we are willing to change and adapt to whatever information we have access to. It just puts us so much further than those that are older now. So I completely agree.
There's some kind of term for it. I can't think of the term, but there's a specific term for the effect of sort of being born within the compartmentalized existence of some kind of technology, and your brain just fundamentally processes it differently than somebody who wasn't. Like, you know, even if you know,
digital native, is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's another term for basically our generation, but there's a term for the psychological effect of somebody who's, you know, a Gen Xer or a boomer, or even slightly younger, even like on the older end of the millennial spectrum, who didn't grow up with computers. And then, you know, I feel like our generation, like, you know, specifically, I'm 32, and somebody specifically in my generation, we were the first generation to be born and live our entire childhoods with like the internet. And so our brains just fundamentally process it differently than somebody who, like my parents, or even like somebody who's like maybe 5 to 10 years older than me. And that's the reason why they fall for the weird chain letters and the fake news and things like that, because they just don't know how to look out for those little tricks, because they just didn't grow up with that. So it just doesn't even enter their mind. Whereas I'm sitting there, I'm just like, Bonzi Buddy trained me for this. Like, Bonzi Buddy. I know what you're trying to do. A little monkey once taught me.
Little purple monkey boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to, I don't know who it was. Forgive me if it was you guys. This is embarrassing. But I was listening to somebody talk about how like you were kind of talking about, Dave, the monoculture of like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. They just have a feeling and a vibe, and you can just see it. And like the vibe of 1982 is slightly different than the vibe of 1987, but not really. Like, to an outsider, they feel the same. The early 2000s and even the 2010s, they are way more ambiguous because of what you discussed. The internet kind of opens up and breaks the monoculture. We don't really have, we do have like similar feelings, but it's way harder to describe, oh, that is the 2000s, that is the 2010s. It's way more murky and ambiguous.
Well, especially the way that our culture is now obsessed with nostalgia.
Yes.
You know, like, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, just because, like, nostalgia is not a positive word. Like, people use it, like, you know, my day job is, you know, media stuff, same with Andrew, and it will be in meetings, and people will always be discussing, like, you know, well, nostalgia, we gotta make sure that it's got a big nostalgic hook to it. Like, what's the hook? And it's like, nostalgia, the definition of what it used to be, and this isn't me being grumpy about words evolving. I like when words evolve, and I think it's fascinating. But the definition of the word used to be you having a painful experience about the inability to go home again, remembering something both fondly but also with a sense of kind of inborn negative, like, I'll never be able to experience that again.
That's so accurate.
And now that's not what it means. Now it's, I was exposed to something before, and now I'm getting that same feeling again. Like, nostalgia just doesn't mean what it used to mean, which is cool. It's fine. I don't give a shit if the word evolves. But it's a fascinating thing of, like, somebody the other day was talking about episode 9, or 8, whatever the new J.J. Abrams, the last Star Wars episode was, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, nice.
Rise of Skywalker.
And somebody was saying, like, yeah, the movie wasn't that great, and yeah, I didn't like how they handled this, but honestly, it was worth it just for the nostalgia. And I was like, it's interesting that you would phrase it that way, and I understand what you mean under the new colloquial evolution of nostalgia, but also it's fascinating that someone would be drawn to that painful experience. That, to me, it's more interesting that people would be going to something that is hurtful almost as a sense of group catharsis.
Well, I think the evolution might, I mean, this is just a shot in the dark, but I think it kind of stems out of the commercialization of it, kind of takes away that negative connotation of just like, oh, yeah, that thing you had, no, it wasn't painful, we can give it back to you. It's great again, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Remember how great it was?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nostalgia has become sort of a psychological salve too. It's a thing to recede into whenever you're not so happy about your life right now. And you know, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups. I won't give away too much of the secret sauce, but a lot of the way that Dave and I have been able to build our show and get it, you know, as big as it is now is by just aggressively marketing it in Facebook groups. Yeah. And I'm in a ton of nostalgia Facebook groups. And you know, I wouldn't be in these groups by choice other than just to distribute content, because honestly, they're just cesspools. They're like, you know, imagine how shitty like Facebook is and just the horrible things that people say on that, the horrible things that people share, and imagine like a little place where people think that they're in private within Facebook.
Nightmare.
And these places are just places are just cesspools of horrible, bigoted, racist, sexist, whatever ist you could think of. They're terrible places, and I kind of don't think they should exist. But because they galvanize like the worst in you as a person and allow you to sort of live your life at your worst through the combination of the feeling of anonymity you have.
I'm calling up Mark right now. Got him on speaker.
The Zuck? You got Big Zuck's number?
Please welcome Zuck.
Hey, it's Big Buck Zuck. Bring him in.
Zuck.
Big. That's what you know that they know him now, because that's only what his closest friends call him.
Yeah, I got him on speed dial. It's Big Buck.
I'm in a lot of nostalgia groups, and it's honestly just very sad. There's a version of a meme that I've seen a million different versions of it, and there's one in particular that I've seen that just comes to mind, where it's kind of an illustration of a bunch of kids with their backs to the camera, crowded around like an old TV, like a 90s looking TV. I think they're in a basement, and they're all crowded around, and they've got a N64, and there's 4 kids, and they're all holding controllers, and they're playing GoldenEye, and the text on the meme is like, you know, none of us knew that this would be the best time of our life, or whatever.
Sad.
And like, that's just so heartbreaking to me that there are people, and they have hundreds and hundreds of shares, hundreds of comments, hundreds of reactions, likes, or whatever. And it's just so sad to me that some people feel that way, that they retreat into nostalgia or like the things of their childhood, because they're just it's a way to compartmentalize themselves psychologically from the just unhappiness that they feel with the current day, and where their lives are at now, and they try to sort of blame it on this idea that like, as you get older, life just gets shittier, and that kind of true in a way. I mean, certainly you are confronted with the the actual sort of existential problems in life, and you have to obviously, move out on your own and pay bills and confront reality. But that's not like, oh, life sucks. That's just like, oh, that is just, the next stage in life. And, ideally you adapt to that, and ideally you carve out a path and you find a new type of happiness.
Like having money and not having to rely on your parents to drive you everywhere.
Well, and I feel like when people make a claim, like they'll say, GoldenEye was the best video game ever, and they relate it to their childhood, and that was when they were the happiest, and that's what they think. I feel like, and then from then on, they don't think about anything else possibly being the best video game again, or the best book or whatever. They don't really open the doors to new media or new avenues of education and exposure. They're just kind of like, this was the best, and it's always going to be the best, but I'm just going to keep trucking along thinking that's the best.
Yeah, my dad said something once that stuck with me to this day. Scares the shit out of me. He was like, his like favorite band is like Journey or whatever. Just rag on my dad.
Hey, don't stop believing, bro.
The wheels in the sky keep on turning,
and he was like,
I don't know where I'll be tomorrow.
And I asked him one time as a kid, I was like, why do you like Journey so much? And he was like, well, they were popular when I graduated. And he was like, kind of going, he was like, talk to anybody like my age, they'll probably like they're probably their favorite music is like what was cool when they graduated. Whenever you get older and you graduate, you're probably, that's that time in your life, that's what you're gonna really like, and you're gonna stick with it forever. Scared the fuck out of me. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna hit a point where I just stop, and then I just stop liking new things. And like that has stuck with me forever.
Once you listen to Journey, it's over.
I was like, that's absolutely not fucking true. That is terrifying.
There's
waiting to hit that point, but
there's some kind of statistic that people stop listening to new music after the age of 32. I forget the exact numbers or whatever, but there's some kind of statistic about that.
So you're done.
Yeah,
get what you're saying. You're done.
Well, I don't know if this applies to all generations, but I can definitely see like maybe this is unique to us, and as we were talking about before, and as Dave said, the moving away from monoculture, but I definitely can understand this idea of becoming increasingly overwhelmed with the sheer amount of new things that you have to sort of keep up with, and sort of like reaching a brick wall where you're basically like, all right, I'm just going to stop at 2006 and
everything
I'm just going to stay there because that's where I understand things. I know what's going on there. I don't feel like I'm missing out on like thousands and thousands of bands that I've just never heard of, and like I can understand and relate to that idea. I don't know if that's unique to our generation or if that's just always exists, but I gotta feel like it has to in some way be kind of unique to us because of the fact that there's just undeniably there has been a hugely exponential growth in the amount of stuff that exists.
It's also
like
our ability to get it. It's like when you can get everything, you're like, where do I start? Shit, I don't know.
But that being said, no, I don't. I try not to allow myself to fall into that trap. I
don't let them win.
Yeah, I try to discover new things all the time. I mean, one of my favorite new musicians. I mean, Dave and I, we have a shared deep love for our girl CRJ. Carly Rae Jepsen.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
And that's not music either of us should be listening to necessarily. But
fuck it.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Yeah, why not?
I love
she is greatly like underrated and like panned because of
where is she panned? Tell me the name of these people who pan her. Fuck them.
Because of Call Me Maybe in the Eye of the
Yeah,
Public.
you mean the greatest song in Canadian history?
I'm on your side.
Yeah, I mean, I've coined that as the Carly Rae Jepsen effect, where if you have too early of a massive success, it can actually end up cratering your ability to find future success, because Call Me Maybe was so big that no matter how good her, and don't get me wrong, I love Call Me Maybe, like I love that song, and I actually the album that came from, definitely not, I don't like it as much as Emotion, but that album is called This Kiss, or it's something Kiss, maybe it's just Kiss. That's a good album. It's got a nice Sam Cooke sample on it. But no matter how good her next album was going to be, most people were going to write her off as like, oh, she made that annoying song.
Yep.
And they didn't even give it a chance.
Yep. Happens time and
The
time again.
other thing I love about Carly Rae Jepsen, one, I like her music a lot. Two, I like her writing a lot. But the thing I like about Carly Rae Jepsen is that, and maybe this is the Canadian thing in her, but she comports herself as a normal person. Like there is a distinct lack of performative exhibition in her interviews where, and look, everybody's code switching and there's a kayfabe where you're just like, I'm approachable and normal. Like, yes, I'm aware that that's a thing too. But with her, she very well could be playing the I'm a pop star card. She could be too cool for school, and she decidedly doesn't do that. And even if you look at like her romantic partners, most of them are just guys that she like connects with and finds common interests with, and then they date, and then maybe it works out or maybe it doesn't. Like right now she's dating a guy who produced a bunch of behind the scenes featurettes for like mid-tier Seth Rogen comedies. Like
what Dave is trying to say is, I kind of feel like Carly Rae Jepsen, if she just met me, got to know me, I feel like I have a chance.
Connect.
Look, all I'm saying is, call me maybe. No, I'm saying that I really respect the fact that she could be attempting to play a game that she obviously has no interest in, and that is very commendable to me, especially as a female artist where you're commodified and your sexuality is typically on display and marketed towards people. The fact that she is putting the work forward and choosing to take a different path, I think is very commendable.
She needs a sword, though.
You
guys know that meme?
Yes. Yes. But also, she has the best bangs in the business. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's true. There's no denying that.
CRJ's BCB for life, baby.
Welcome
life.
to the first episode of the Carly Rae Jepsen Stan cast.
I'm Dave Baker. Today we're going to be discussing Carly Rae Jepsen's BCB. What are BCB? Well, blunt cut bangs, my friend. They're sweeping the nation.
All right. Who went? Oh, it was Dave. Jeez, we talk a lot.
Some annoying indie comic from the 2000s. What's yours? What's yours?
Yeah, what's up, Andrew?
Yeah, what'd you bring?
It's funny that you brought up video games or the idea of like a sort of reactionary rebellion in video games in the same way that book or Cecil B. Demented or whatever. I don't know if that exists. I mean, I do know like back in that time, there was like the games like Postal, which was like specifically designed to be like, fuck you. This is the most edgy, offensive shit you could ever see. Fuck you. Fuck censorship. I guess that was what that was. But in a very much more ham-fisted and less interesting way. Mm-hmm. Just a really just overtly, purposely offensive first-person shooter game. But my thing is, I don't have anything tangible. I do have, I don't know if you want to even play these or what, but I have some footage. But so the thing I wanted to talk about was, I thought of something that was not only highly nostalgic for me when I was growing up, but also like kind of a very useful tool that shaped a lot of my creativity and was there for me during a time when I was trying to get out a lot of creative ideas and didn't necessarily.
Which version of nostalgic? The newer definition or the older one?
Definitely both.
Okay.
Both 100% or 50% each, I guess. So whenever I was a kid, I was really into making RPG Maker games. So RPG Maker was this game that you could make games with. And there was like these really kind of dumbed down versions of them that had been imported that were on the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2. But they kind of sucked. Like they were very limited in what you could do, and they were essentially just gimmicks. But this company, Interbrain, that had made these, they had a PC version that was essentially just a fully featured game engine for making games without having to know any programming or coding at all. And if you knew coding, you could actually go even deeper. And they just had no interest in ever importing them. This was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever there was still this huge division between the Japanese and US markets, and there was just all these different types of things that Japan just didn't think that the US market would care about or understand. So they never wanted to import this, but then this random Russian guy named Don Miguel just completely cracked it and released an English translation online for free. And so whenever I was young, when I was like in late elementary school, middle school era age, this thing became huge, where all kinds of kids were just getting this and making games. And yeah, it's a PC, it's PC software. It's called RPG Maker, and you can make games with it. You can make role playing, like turn-based battle role playing games. And essentially the type of game you could make, it was very much like the game Earthbound, which is almost what I was going to bring to this. And then thinking about Earthbound made me remember this, and I thought this was kind of like more of an interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But what if we combined Merzbow with Earthbound and made Merzbound?
You're
He's
literally
making a good point.
The
You're literally
entire
speaking my
soundtrack
language.
is just noise music. Ness is running around.
Honestly, that's not even far off from like some of this stuff. But yeah, I made a lot of games with RPG Maker. This was a really useful tool for somebody who really wanted to tell stories and really wanted to make things that had narratives to them, but was kind of constrained by not knowing anybody else who was into the same kind of stuff, and really not having like a whole lot of friends to actually like do things with. And,
My whole childhood. Cool.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of people I know, like they have all these, home movies of like shorts and sketches and things that they made with their friends whenever they were in like elementary school. And I didn't have that. I didn't really have any friends at all, let alone friends who wanted to make weird movies and stuff like that.
I just forced my little sisters into doing it, and then inevitably we would get like 3 hours into making something, and I would make all these costumes out of like paper mache and tinfoil wrap. Like I made everybody wear these like Geordie LaForge like visor glasses because I was obsessed with Geordie LaForge. I don't even think I had actually ever seen Star Trek at that point, but I had just seen the visor, and I was so into the visor.
Iconic.
And we made a movie called Little Joe where I made my middle sister be this like good like a mensch who was this hobo mensch, where she would like go around and she played this character named Little Joe, and she would like help people out of these circumstances. And my mom was the cameraman, and then I was the person in trouble who had cyborg parts, I guess. I don't know. But inevitably it would always be the same thing. We would shoot for like 3 hours, and then she would lose her mind and be really, really upset at me for something inconsequential. And she would run down the hallway of our house and then slam the door and say, "I'm never working with you again."
That's like student films in
That's
college.
how Dave was blacklisted.
Yeah, it
Your sister testified in front of a court of law that you
and I
were
refused to answer
communist.
the questions. Yeah. Have you ever been, or were you ever a member of the Little Joe party?
I kind of had a similar thing where like the closest I ever got to making like movies when I was a kid was like trying to make something with my cousin. But ultimately, yeah, I didn't know that. Also, a great Geordie LaForge visor, the plastic little tray from Lifesaver gummies.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Bet you didn't think about that, motherfucker.
We also used
maybe your sister would have stayed working with you if you were having ideas like that.
if I would have actually put the work in.
Yeah.
We also used, those like half circle hair fastener things. I don't even know what the fucking thing's called anymore.
Yeah.
That
That's like
thing.
a perfect, yeah.
Yeah. We would just put that over her face and then make a tie out of shoelaces.
Your sister vowed to never do non-union shoots ever again.
Yeah. She was like,
done.
meal penalty! Meal penalty!
Yeah, meal penalty. No, I used to. I didn't really have friends that wanted to really film with me. So when I was little, I used to just like give dialogue to my action figures and
Classic.
have like very classic. But then I would tape receipts to the wall and scroll down on the receipts to make my credits.
Nice.
Wait, but did you change? Like,
That's
did
some
you
outsider
scroll
art right
words
there.
on it? Did you put words on it, or did you actually?
No.
Or was it just like French fries, $2.99? Whatever.
Yeah, no, I think I put like the title of whatever the title of my film was on the top, and then just whatever was left on the receipt, I just scrolled down. Like it could have
Oh man, that's so awesome.
Wendy's.
That's exactly what I did for my senior thesis in my art class. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. That was I admired your choice.
Yeah, me and my dad made a home movie once. It's literally on the side of the VHS. The thing that's written on it is literally just Hulk Home, because we just used all my various Hulk action figures and made a new story, and I cameo as some army sergeant on a with binoculars saying, "There he is. There's the Hulk."
Was this after Ang Lee's Hulk too?
Yes, because the toys were from like the promotion of that film, which
Yeah, so I mean, you guys have all these stories, and like famously, there's like the kid who like reshot Indiana Jones, and like the angry video game nerd. His whole thing was like he grew up like making those weird little movies and stuff like that. I didn't have any of that, so what I did was I used RPG Maker to make games, and the idea was like, I mean, I loved video games and I loved RPGs, in the first place. So I was huge into Final Fantasy, and like one of my favorite games of all time is Chrono Trigger.
Hell
and, like Earthbound, and a lot of the like Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 era like Japanese role playing games. So there was that of just making a Final Fantasy or whatever, but also in reality it was a way to just make animated movies, because you could use this to have sprites and you make them walk around and they can talk to each other, and there's dialogue boxes and you can tell a story, and then there's also the interactive element of it just being a game, and you can walk around and you can fight monsters and there's a battle system and stuff. So I spent a lot of my young adulthood just sitting in front of a computer making games. There was a really cool community. There was and is still a very cool community around RPG Maker. And I remember when I was a kid, I was a part of like an RPG Maker collective, just a bunch of people who we had a website, and it was like a bunch of different game makers, and we all had our own games that we made. And it was funny because I was kind of like the scrub, like. They were like, you're showing potential, kid, and like they would kind of like criticize my games and things like that. Yeah, but they actually at the time they actually made some really cool stuff. There was one of the guys, he made a game called Dark Tower, which was like a game of like, what if you were the villain? So it was an RPG of like, what if you were Kuja or Kefka or Sephiroth, like that type of character. What if you were that character? And it was all about being a villain. That's awesome. And kind of seeing the story from that perspective. Like there was cool stuff like that. There was like really funny games. There was really serious games. There was like because it was all these different creators making all this different stuff. And in the world of video games, it was like it was like this outsider art community, which is why I loved it so much, because once again, it was going back to this idea of a bunch of people who are not game designers. A lot of them are kids. They don't know how to make games. They don't know how to program. All they have is this tool that they've been given that is just this weird Japanese program that was fan translated, and they're just telling stories and making weird stuff with it. And it was a really fun community to be a part of. And I made 3 games in my whole time of doing this, my whole phase of RPG Maker. I made a game that was kind of like an Earthbound ripoff, for reasons that I cannot even begin to explain. The game was called POOPSEX.
Yes.
Oh yes. That will sell.
Yes.
Yeah.
On name alone.
I made a game that was a fantasy RPG adaptation of Seinfeld. So it was like, what if Seinfeld was a fantasy role-playing game? So you play as Jerry Seinfeld, and you go around, and like all the like various quests were like vague recreations of episode premises and things like that.
Printing money.
What's the deal with these ogres?
That's kind of what it was. I like literally, there's dialogue in it that says something like that.
Hey Jerry, here's a quest for you.
Yeah, and then the third game, I like magnum opus, which was like I was gonna make an actual game. I was gonna make a game that was like literally like hours and hours long, and I made like
3.
yes, I made like a demo of it. Like I abandoned it. It never got finished, but it was supposed to be like this, actual like 20-hour long epic fantasy RPG, and it was called Mercenary Legacy X, and it was gonna be like my Final Fantasy. Obviously I never finished it. I made like 15 minutes of it, and then RPG Maker kind of went on to shift in the later years into this like really cool avant-garde art community. Like I kind of
right up your
rediscovered,
alley.
yeah, I rediscovered RPG Maker like years later, and had learned that like since I had last been into it, it had changed from a bunch of 12-year-olds making Final Fantasy ripoffs to like people making like weird, bizarre like art pieces within the construct of like an RPG, or with the tools that they could use. And there's a lot of really cool games that have these huge cult followings. There's this game called Yume Nikki, which is like a weird horror game about this little Japanese girl who like enters a dream world, and she has to navigate through all these weird, bizarre levels that are kind of like just these strange, surreal worlds that are constructed out of all of this like pixel art. And it was created by this mysterious Japanese game designer who nobody knows his real identity, and he made this game, and this game became so popular that
I
like there's
smell a deep cuts episode.
yeah, I mean it's definitely at the tip of my peripheral to do something about this whole thing.
I'm Dave Baker.
There's a game called Space Funeral, which is like you play as like
These names are so sick.
Yeah, you play as a 1930s baseball player, and your friend is just the legs of a horse, and you just travel around fighting all these really like abstract enemies. There's this game called Hylix, which is like this artist did all of the art for it like in stop motion, and like digitized it all and put it into RPG Maker. And it's just this really weird, surrealist, abstract world that I can't like. You'd have to see it to like understand what I'm saying. But it shifted into this really weird kind of like I was talking about before, this like outsider art community where people are making these really interesting things within the sort of confines of what RPG Maker is. And a lot of these games have gained such cult followings that like Yume Nikki was actually like the rights to it were bought by this indie game company, and then they remade it. And it's like on Steam, like you can play the like 3D remake of this game that was an RPG Maker game.
That is sick.
And yeah, I would highly recommend checking out some of these games if you're into like weird avant-garde or like outsider art, and if you like video games and if you like RPGs, and even if you know about RPG Maker and you remember playing it and you kind of moved away from it and you don't know that this whole thing sprung up, like you should look up some of these really weird RPG Maker games because they're super interesting. And yeah, it's like I said, it's like video games version of outsider art. Like this is where that community lives, basically.
That's so cool.
That's
I'm gonna have
awesome.
to check that out because it's always cool to see what it's like the legacy of something long gone. Like what's changed. If the fact that it still has a living community is cool in itself.
We kind of
But
touched on that with Bionicles, like how like people have like funny but like actually serious. Like people have stayed with it for like years, and they're still like making fan content, making like fan films for
writing
it.
original scripts for
It's
all their
awesome.
content. It's
So
crazy.
cool. But yeah,
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll do mine last. Mine is more of a how much do you guys remember about kind of like the early 2000s era of marketing, and how there used to always be like either a mascot and how commercials were, and I feel like they were a big deal with their mascots till like 2000, like like Chester Cheetah and who else? There's a few.
Like Petco, not Petco, that commercials with the little puppet dog.
Yeah,
And
that would come up and well, and then there was like the
Quiznos
classic,
hamsters or whatever.
yeah, or was it the Kia hamsters?
yeah, yep.
yeah.
And like what else? Or things like that Campbell's commercial where the can like follows someone
Iconic.
home, and like I think they still air it today every once in a while. Well, I found one that I completely forgot. It aired on, I believe it started airing on Cartoon Network in 2003 or 4. No, if you want to pull up the link.
Do you have?
It's-
Can you send those to me in the chat?
Oh yeah,
You
I'll
have
send you the
the
chat.
link?
I usually do that.
Smash that link, bruh.
Smash that
Smash
link.
that link.
Smash that like button. Keep an eye out for my next album,
subscribe.
POOPSEX.
Hit the. I will never ever be able to unthink the phrase "POOPSEX" now.
It's ingrained in here forever now. But I'm
sad thing is-
specifically talking about the Nestea Snowman.
This is.
I don't know if you guys remember him.
I-
I didn't remember it until I saw someone posted a clip of it, and I couldn't believe it was real. But it would play on Cartoon Network at like 10 o'clock. And here's just a compilation of some.
Oh shit, I do remember this.
Yep.
This is so iconic to me. The
It's a snowman with a skeleton.
yeah. The like sensual nature of it.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it's
No,
so
it's-
sexually charged. I don't
Yeah,
understand. It made me confused as a child. Where's the one in the laundromat? That's the one I want.
There's one that's paired with Charlie's Angels. With the one with
I mean, I love this stop motion
This is
skeleton.
Yeah.
yeah. I
Or
thought the
I guess
animation was
it's
actually really
CGI.
good.
Sometimes stop motion and sometimes like early CGI. I can't tell. Oh, yeah, it's sick. This is the one I remember going into the theaters and like this would play before the movie. Like I remember vividly watching this and I was like confused because I was
Nestea
like,
only ran these for like I think like 3 to 4 years, and that was it.
so cool though. The animation is sick. Yeah, that part where
Yep.
he
Yep.
gives her
forgot,
the
like,
bra. So confusing.
Like they
to
would
me as a
advertise that
child.
to kids too. Like it's so blatant. It's just funny. It feels like a whole different. I mean, it was a different era. It was a different time.
Yeah, weirdly sexualized iced tea commercials.
When
Not
you-
a
when you said
phrase you
that-
think you're gonna say.
When you said that, I thought they were Coca-Cola commercials. For some reason, as a kid, to me, they were Coca-Cola commercials. But this, I guess they were.
They kind of feel like Coca-Cola's, like because they advertise it being fresh, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, Coca-Cola would never be that sexy.
True, they wouldn't do that.
They would have some polar
by the way,
bears.
this podcast is brought to you by Nestea.
You guys
They're
signed.
bringing back
the
Ice Cool.
contract. You guys signed the contract up top, right?
Yeah, did you see the little waiver we
NDA,
sent you?
Yep.
Cool. What's this? What's this next link
Nestea,
you've
fuck
got?
a snowman.
If you use the code Let's Look Back, you'll get 30 days worth of Nestea snowman.
What is this little picture?
Oh, that was just because I couldn't find a wiki for it or anything, so I only found this fucking WordPress article or blog. And it's
The
really
world's only Nestea snowman fan who's just kept the spirit alive for years.
Yeah, like one
this is the
person
version of
just.
This is the version of the Andrew WK and Steve Mike information page.
Yeah. Oh man, I love this guy. But yeah, that's so like that encapsulates just like a moment in time for me. Like I said, like walking into a theater and seeing the advertisements play beforehand and watching that, and like sitting with my dad and feeling uncomfortable that I was watching a stop motion snowman pick up a girl's bra and give it to her. I was just like, what is this? Why do I feel strange? What is going on?
What is this tightness? What is
Why
happening?
why do I suddenly want to buy a Nestea?
Yeah, what's happening? Can I buy that?
The animation
so
of
thirsty.
it, the animation of it and the design of it kind of reminds me a little bit of Grim Fandango, which is a late '90s point-and-click adventure game. Which I almost use that as my thing. I was going to talk about point and clicks, but then I decided on RPG Maker. But
Is it point and clicks or points and click?
Point and clicks. They're point and clicks.
But are you sure it's not points and click?
Get it right, Dave. It's
I feel like it could be points and click.
Click starring Adam Sandler.
Yeah. That's actually what it is. There's got to be. I know it's in here somewhere. Let me find this.
What even
Table of
is Nestea
Contents.
still a thing, or is that
Yeah, Nestea still, but they like completely rebranded. They're like,
they were like, fuck the sexual snowman, we're getting away from that.
we're getting rid of.
It's now just like a talking like MAGA hat. That's their new fucking flagship mascot.
Hey kids. Oh my god.
Kids, we're here to quench your thirst. It's amazing. It's tremendous thirst quenching. Tremendous.
Wow.
And then Trump's face also melts off, and then
Yeah. Trump's
skeleton.
face melts, but then underneath it's just a stack of MAGA hats.
here we go.
Walking MAGA hats.
What?
Oh yeah, I
Oh
noticed
yeah,
that. Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's immediately
Oh, yeah.
what it reminded me of. Is the character design of that, which is like it's patterned after like Day of the Dead type art. Which I think
yeah.
It seemed like they were speaking Spanish in those commercials. So
They
maybe
did.
it was
A lot of those commercials aired in Brazil first, and then they started broadcasting them in the U.S. So they definitely had some inspiration. But
Interesting.
yeah, I just wanted to pick your brain at the simplicity of early 2000s brand marketing. It felt like, I feel like now brands have to try, well, depending on what brand it is, I guess. You have to try a little bit harder to not be so obvious with your marketing.
Well, it's that, but it's also, there has to be like this metatextual element to it. It always has to be like a wink nudge, like, we know this is an ad, you know this is an ad, we know what we're doing here, we know what you like. It's like that kind of weird relationship.
Yeah,
where
you don't like watching ads, but we're making an ad and you're going to watch the ad. So we're going to try and make it as good as we can, and you're going to probably buy the thing that we're advertising, even though you don't want it. But hey, it's an ad. Let's do it.
Whereas this era was like, you're dumb, buy it. It's like,
Yeah.
we actually talked about that on the Andrew WK episode. The idea
really?
in the late 90s and the early 2000s, pop culture kind of went into this weird thing of just like very hypersexualized. Everything became very like surface level. We kind of like stopped evolving culturally in our media, and it was all like movies and commercials and music that was all just capitalizing off of like, look at how hot everybody is. And then like
it stayed like this for years. Like it
Yeah,
didn't,
into the 2000s,
like you said,
yeah.
it was like stagnant for I think probably till 2008-9. It felt like
Yeah.
it was this this stuff all the time.
The
Especially in
economic
commercials.
crisis was like, all right, nobody's sexy anymore. Let's reel it
Everybody
back.
is not sexy.
Nobody's sexy. Sexy's dead.
Let's get serious, everyone.
Sexy went down with the housing market. We're changing things up.
Oh gosh.
I think that sexy snowman made Dave uncomfortable. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. We didn't have a disclaimer.
Must have given him the cold shoulder or something.
Oh! You're fired. You're fired. Get off the show. But yeah, is that all you had for
That's
that
all I have
beautiful
for
snowman?
Yeah, just wanted to talk about the sexy Nestea snowman.
Well, this has been quite lovely. This has been a dream come true.
Yeah, no, this has been really, really great.
So thank you guys so much for joining us. I feel like you guys fit right in with our strange little show. I hope that all of our friends watching check out Deep Cuts. Plug your stuff. What do you want people to how do you want people to interact with your stuff?
I guess I have to go first because I always go first on the show, right? You can find my comics at heydavebaker.com. Comics like Fuck Off Squad, Action Hospital, and Shitty Watchmen. If you want to see lots of time lapses of me drawing and or in progress pages for the book that I'm working on right now, Mary Tyler Moorhawk, you can follow me on the Shermstagerms at xDaveBakerX. Andrew?
You can find me at dapricerights.com, which true story, up until a certain point was a fake kayfabe website that I made up, and then eventually Dave and then one of our other listeners convinced me to make it into a real website, and now you can actually go there. It's not just a joke goose chase. You can go there. You can buy my comic.
The kayfabe has been lifted.
Yep, and you also just listen to Deep Cuts, but also you can follow us on Instagram at Deep Cuts Pod, and more importantly, follow us on Facebook, the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook page. We do a lot of cool videos where we basically look at a bunch of old footage of stuff from the past, whether it's like old weird bootleg Japanese movies or like strange footage from the news or just weird shit that happened on a game show one time, and we kind of watch it and react to it, and we put out these kind of like informative videos where you're kind of watching the footage, but then we're also kind of like giving you a backstory behind it.
It's kind of like a mini condensed version. So if you don't want to sit through 5 hours of us talking about Andrew WK, you can watch us for like 2 minutes talk about something weird. But yeah, they're really fun. Also, the Facebook group, the Facebook group, which you both should come hang out in, is really fun.
I'm in there.
When all the episodes go up, there's lots of group discussion, lots of man, this is fucking nuts, and lots of lots of people.
This is crazy. Yeah.
yeah. We talk to you guys through Instagram, but that's really kind of like Instagram has kind of been a little bit of a newer thing that we've started that kind of hasn't taken off yet, but it's really popping over on Facebook. You get in that Facebook group, we got people talking about like postmortems on episodes and sharing ideas for new episodes. Some of the episodes we've done have actually been fan suggestions, and
one of the
we'll make an appearance, that's for sure. I'll go ahead and join.
I'm in that group, man.
It's a good time, and by good time I mean lots of people not having a toxic Facebook group. Everyone's very nice in our group.
I appreciate it.
It's the only non-toxic Facebook group on the entire Facebook. Even the Phoebe Bridgers Facebook group I'm in has turned toxic, but never the
Stream
Deep Cuts
Punisher.
Facebook group.
Stream Punisher now.
Not my Deep Cuts.
Yeah, baby, it's Halloween? No, I don't think so. Baby, it's we're gonna all fight about Phoebe Bridgers. That's what it is.
Yep.
But yeah, thank you guys so much. This has been wonderful. I don't even know what we normally say to end the show. But Dave, can you take it out by doing a lovely impression of Casey Kasem? That is my favorite impression that you do. Can you please do something to end the show? Just
wait. Let me direct this. So
Okay.
Dave, start by doing a Rod Serling. Do your Rod Serling.
Say subscribe to Let's Look Back on Spotify and YouTube.
You're looking down. Oh shit! It's wait, hold on. I gotta not smile.
I gotta stop.
I can't smile while I'm doing it, or else I fuck it up. Hold on.
Yeah, Rod Serling never smiles.
No, Rod Serling never smiles. You're looking down a dark hallway. In that hallway, you see a subscribe button. You smash that subscribe button, and then you are delivered delightful content every week. And this place that you have just entered is the Let's Look Back zone.
Now drink 4 martinis.
I'm Gazy Gazum, and I just subscribe to Let's Look Back. Okay. It's coming in at number 29 and number 30 on the top 10 podcasts that you should be listening to.
All right, now drink 8 ounces of water for the next 4 hours on the hour.
Thank you very much. I'm Noah. That's Tennyson.
Thank you again.
Thank you guys so much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks.